have the 40-minute version because it's 10 to 12 now, and sometimes it's helpful to think of the different religions as like different languages. So, for example, if you grow up in the United States, the chances are that you'll be English speaking. If you're in Mexico or South America, you'll be Spanish speaking. If you're in China, you're going to end up being Chinese speaking. So, if you're in India, the chances are you'll be a Hindu because that's what everybody is practically. And if you're in America, chances are that if you have a religious connection at all, you'll be a Christian because just like you'll be speaking English and then this is what's sort of available to you. Now the thing is, like when we're talking about other religious traditions, we're not actually part of it. I mean, like, if I'm talking about Hinduism, I'm not a Hindu. I don't live in that context. I don't go to the festivals. I don't do their things they do in terms of rituals. I'm not fluent in it, even though I can talk about it. So I feel that, like I used to take French. I know a few French words now, but I'm not fluent in it. I can't actually function in it. So we're kind of fluent in the Christian faith, but we're not fluent in Hinduism or Islam or Judaism because we're not part of those traditions. But like language, every civilization has a language, and language functions in the same way. I mean, language is necessary for human beings if they're going to communicate. And it might be argued that some languages are more expressive. They have more of a literature. You can say more things. So right now, we're not actually talking about the relationship between the Christian faith and other traditions. That's a separate topic. What we're doing in these sessions is trying to get the facts straight. I mean, like, so that we can actually know something about these and kind of have a sympathetic, friendly description of what they are and what they stand for and their practices and so on. So, if somebody tells you, how come we're talking about Hinduism in a Christian church, all right, just tell them we're just trying to know something about it. We're not promoting it. We're not advocating it. We're not arguing for it. Okay, today we're going to cover Hinduism, and this is the tradition that, unlike Islam, is going to actually has an impact on us. Hinduism doesn't have that same kind of impact. But Hinduism is a very interesting tradition, and I think that you find this sort of interesting today. Okay, there are 800 million Hindus. They are mostly in India, and this makes them the third largest religion in the world. Christian faith is the largest, Islam is the second largest, and Hinduism is the third largest. This is a map of India, and the word Hindu comes from the Persian Sindus, which is the word for the Indus River right here, which is in Pakistan. And then when the Mongols came, they call Hindu to describe the people living east of the Indus River. And when the British came, they applied the term to non-Muslims in this particular region. The earliest religion in India is the Vedic religion. And there are 4 Vedas. These are ancient texts in Sanskrit that contains over 1,000 hymns in praise and adoration addressed to their gods. And the early Vedic religion centered around the fire sacrifice. And in these hymns, you have mentioned 4 different deities. Agni, who is concerned with the fire sacrifice. Indra, with martial conquest. Soma, with mystical experience. And Varuna, with the maintenance of the moral order. Practices include chanting the Vedic hymns in exact cadences and the use of mantras. Later on, a group of writings called the Upanishads were attached to the Vedas, and this is after 1000 BCE. And in the Upanishads, you have a kind of a philosophy that developed, that we associated with one aspect of Hinduism. The ultimate reality is called Brahman. This is the absolute. This is the really real. That's Brahman. The world, samsara, is illusory. It's real, but it's not really real. It's kind of temporary. It's illusory. And the individual soul, which is called an Atman, wanders from birth to death and again until it finds release in moksha, specifically from realizing that it is nothing other than Brahman. Okay, so here's the diagram. You have Brahman is the absolute, the really real. Then the Atman, your soul, is really real too, but it's kind of separated from the Brahman. So, and so what you're trying to do is the self, let's just call it the self. The self persists and it wanders from life to life. And what you want to do is, you don't want to be wandering from life to life. You want to get out of this, be released from this, so that your deepest self becomes merged with the absolute, with the really real. All right, so you got that? I mean, in general.
Say that again.
That's why today, when you're talking to people who are kind of into Eastern religions, they will say, your deepest self is divine. All right, instead of God being out here, God is actually in you, and that you need to get in touch with the God that is in you. All right. So this is a typical Hindu way of thinking about life. Karma, yan yun, all right? What you put out into the world comes back to you. How you live your life determines what kind of life you will have. And basically, your destiny in the samsara, which is this sensory world, is determined by your actions. So, if I think good thoughts and do good deeds, then when I come into my next life, I will be at a little higher level than before. But if you're down in a lower level, it's because you didn't do good deeds. I mean, you didn't need to do more good deeds. So this is called karma. Now, if your deepest self really wants to merge with the Brahman, with the Absolute, it's not just thinking that your deepest self is identical to the Brahman. You have to actually come to that experience, and you do this in the Hindu tradition by practicing yoga, so that you can actually realize in your own life the truth of the fact that your deepest self is really identical with what the absolute real. So yoga involves practices to unify and focus bodily powers for the purpose of realizing their true spiritual essence, the Atman within, the true self. Most of you are not going to do this because it requires a lot of effort. Practitioners must have high moral character, live in simplicity, and study the teachings regarding the inner reality. And practices include body postures, breath control, focus on a single object, and so forth, leading to a direct awareness, that your deepest self is absolutely identical with the absolute, with the really real. So one way to put it is that for us, our deepest self is kind of separated from the ground of our being. Right? We are actually, or we can say in Christian terms, we're separated from God. But there's a separation there that needs to be reconnected. Many traditional practices draw upon the focus of viewing yantras. These are geometric designs and mandalas, which are complicated space arranged around a divinity. So these are, they focus, they meditate on these yantras, and here are some examples. And finally, here's a mandala, which is a spaces that are organized around a deity, which you see at the center of the deity, right? Now, the best indicator of karma in your life is the caste into which you were born, right? Now, on top are the Brahmins. These are the priests. These are like the highest category. Let's see, I'm going to try to get rid of this arrow. Okay, here are the Brahmins, that's the highest category. Then the Kshatriyas are the warriors and the rulers. This is the second level. Vaishyas are skilled traders, merchants, and minor officials. Then you have the Sudras, which are the unskilled workers. And then you have pariah. These are the untouchables. All right, that's what the word. I mean, when we say you're a pariah, that means they're just sort of out of it. All right. So the best indication of the kind of karma you've collected through successive lives are the castes into which you belong. So in India, they have the caste system, and people pretty much stay in their caste. I mean, they don't intermarry between different castes. So here you have the upper class, and here you have the untouchables. Now, kind of in this scheme of life, there are 4 stages of life. First, you start out as a student studying in the household of the teacher. Then, like many of you, marry householder, raising children, and continuing the father's lineage. Okay, that's where you are, all right? That's where I am. Then we become forest dwellers. All right, we renounce sensuality and sex. We focus on rituals and meditation. That is to say, we're done with careers, with family, with responsibilities. We're now on a kind of a spiritual quest. I mean, kind of getting ready. And then the homeless wanderers. Now, not everybody goes through all these stages. I think a lot of people just stop with the second stage. But the homeless wanderers on the gateway to moksha, that is the release, renouncing all except what they can carry, making pilgrimages to holy site, and practicing yoga. Now, you can tell that this is not going to be a very popular, widespread mass religion. Okay, it's too demanding. It requires you to kind of come to work yourself into a kind of an entirely new state of consciousness that's entirely unlike our daily consciousness. But don't worry, because there are other ways in India where you don't have to do this. And now, in this scheme, there are 4 aims of life: material gain and worldly success, sensory pleasure, sex, and so forth, performing duties proper to one's caste. Now, you can see, I mean, like in our own life, we have to get ahead, get a house, get a career, and so forth. Accumulate money. We want to experience sensory, like we like to eat. Like it's a sort of a sensory. I mean, watching something like this is a sensory pleasure too. I mean, watching movies, and then performing duties proper to one's caste means like we have responsibilities, right, to the society, to the church, and so on. I mean, doing our duty. But finally, again, in the same thing as when performing moksha, which is release, seeking spiritual release, this stage is adopted only by a few. They embrace an ascetic lifestyle, and people respect these people, and because they support them through alms, because they don't work anymore, they're completely on a spiritual quest. People respect people who are like this, and So like, for example, suppose you belong to a village and you had a career, maybe a very distinguished career. And then later on, you come back, you become one of these homeless wanderers, and then they come back to the village, they live a very simple life. They don't talk about the past at all. They don't want you to ask. They don't want you to ask, "What did you do when you were working?" They're completely into seeking release, from this endless cycle of life. And so these are people who are supported by alms. Now later on, now you have the Vedas, then you have the Upanishads, which gives the kind of philosophy I just covered. And now we have another group called the Puranas, another group of Sanskrit writing called Puranas. And Puranas give a different way of connecting with the divine. Right? Now you like this way because this is much easier. Right? And so the Puranas talk about emerging deities that they will extend grace to you and blessings to you in exchange for your devotion. I mean, like, you want to be devoted to like Vishnu, you offer offerings, you're highly, truly devoted, and then Vishnu will extend blessings to you. So this is, the main requirement here is you don't have to do yoga, you don't have to come to a new state of consciousness, you need to focus on a complete devotion to your chosen deity in exchange for which you receive the blessings that you're seeking for. So the aim here is not to obtain release. The aim here is to enter the heaven to be with that deity, into eternity. So now, we're kind of more familiar with this. Now the other approach, like obtaining release, it's like psychoanalysis. I mean, like, psychoanalysis is, well, what's wrong with you is you're neurotic, and you're neurotic because you have all these things that are in the unconscious that are determining your behavior in ways that you're not even aware of. But if you undertake psychoanalysis, which is very expensive, takes a very long time, you're lying down on a couch, you're telling the therapist about your dreams, because when you're dreaming, the things that you're repressing comes out. And then, so the idea there is that if we can unearth all this garbage that we've repressed, then we'd be completely free. So that's like moksha, right? Of course, it never happens. A lot of people think psychoanalysis is actually a fraud. Okay. So you have like a devotion to a particular deity, and then you do this through listening, singing, worshiping, and self-surrender. Now, when you talk about Hinduism, there are many gods, but like they are just seen as different paths to the ultimate reality. So it doesn't, I mean, you can be devoted to a god, or you could be devoted to another god. It doesn't make any difference what god. It's like all gods can be ways in which you can. So it's almost like there's the Baptist way to approach God, there's the Episcopal way to approach God, there's the Roman Catholic way, there's the Greek Orthodox way, there's the Quaker way, with no rituals at all, nobody talks, everybody just sits quietly waiting for the Spirit to speak to them. So in Hinduism, the multiplicity of God is not exactly polytheism, but they are simply like different ways in which you can all kind of approach the ultimate reality. So Hinduism, you want to bring Jesus in, no problem, okay? I mean, like, you have a little altar there, you have all these deities, you want to bring Jesus in, yeah, everybody's welcome. Now, I used to take tours at the Asian Art Museum, and then we cover China, Japan, Korea. The Indian gallery is the most difficult because you have so many images that you don't know. It's like walking into a room and you don't know who these people are. Okay, so when you lead tours like in the Indian gallery, one of the main jobs is to identify who these gods are. But anyway, here are some. Now, strictly speaking, Hindus do not worship the image. I mean, but the part of the divine essence that dwells within the image. Like, for example, you have this image, like a school would have a papier-mâché image. And then what they do, as the students are gathered there, they have an invocation where the person who is leading the service prays that the spirit of the God that the image represents will actually come and dwell within the image. Now, that's not that different. Like when we have open worship, we have an invocation, which is a prayer to invoke the presence of God into our midst. All right. If God doesn't show up when we worship, we're just sort of mumbling to ourselves, right? So when you look at the Hindus worshiping in front of an image, it doesn't mean that they think the image is the God. And the reason you know that is when the God gets worn out, they take it down to the river and just dump it there. I mean, this is not something you do to a real God, all right? So you can think of them as visual aids, right? It kind of focuses your attention, but like it's probably a mistake to say it's not. I don't think it's quite fair to say that these people are worshiping these idols. Now this is Brahma. This is kind of a Brahma, the creator. Now in the Hindu idea, the creation is already completed. So there are no temples in India that is devoted to the worship of Brahma. What you usually find is that there is an image of Brahma, the creator, in the north wall of temples that are devoted to Vishnu, who is the preserver. So here's Vishnu. See, they have heads facing front, sideways, and back. This is a visual way of showing that this God can see everywhere. All right, and when they have multiple arms, this is a visual way, iconic way to say that this God can do many things at the same time. All right, multiple powers. And Vishnu comes in 10 different incarnations, which are usually local heroes or tribal deities, including the Buddha. The Buddha is one of the incarnations of Vishnu. So you have Brahma, the creator, his work is basically done. You have Vishnu, the preserver, who comes to earth in 10 different incarnations. And then finally you have Shiva, the destroyer. And what he does, this is the dance of Shiva, this is the creative energy that animates the world. It's all sometimes represented by a phallic symbol, which is also a symbol of recreation. And what Shiva does is that he saves the world by destroying the old in order to make room for the new. All right. So now you have Brahma, you have Vishnu, you have Shiva, you have Brahma who creates the world, Vishnu who preserves the world, and Shiva who is the principle of change. All right. So you have creation, preservation, and change. So in Hinduism, these are symbolized by different gods. So you can be a devotee of Shiva, or you can be a devotee of Vishnu, and the temples are devoted to these particular deities. It's pretty interesting, huh? Okay. Makes you want to be a Hindu, right? Gods also have female consorts. This is Shiva and Parvati, and here is a bronze group where you have Shiva and Parvati, and this is Kartikaya, their offspring, who is the god of war. Rivers are all goddesses, an important part of Hindu rituals and worship. This is Ganesh, the elephant god. All right, he's a very popular god in Hinduism, and the Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. All right. So in India, if you will have a real big job, you need an elephant, all right? Because the elephant can remove obstacles, all right? So you come before Ganesh not to achieve salvation, but because you have a big obstacle you want to remove, all right? He's the remover of obstacles. So if you're in trouble, you go to Ganesh. And you make, they make offerings of sweet because it has this big pot belly, And this is what he would like. Okay, now, so we've talked about, you know, you have this Upanishad vision of being released, you know, from the unending cycle of life and the karma and so forth. And then you have this other view of the Puranas where you worship a deity through devotion, and that in exchange for which you receive grace and blessing. All right. Now, so if you're in India, you're a Hindu, or you could be a Muslim because the Mongols came in and Muslim, or you can be a Sikh. All right. A Sikh is a kind of a reform movement within Hinduism to correct the errors of the Muslims and the Hindus. All right. So Sikhs are a very important part of religion in India. It was started by Guru Nanak, born 1469. It's their main temple is the Golden Temple in Iristar, Punjab. Now their teachings are very different, you know, from the Hinduism that I just talked about, because it's not that different, you know, from Christian faith. Right? It's actually not. One God, all right, beyond human forms and category. They reject asceticism. They don't want you to be a wandering. They don't want. They say none of those things are necessary. Householders can also attain perfection. Right. So this is a very democratic kind of a faith. They reject the value of ritual acts, pilgrimages, the authority of the Vedas, and the Brahmin caste. Or everything that's important to Hinduism is rejected by the Sikhs. So they say that humans are to reject the ego-centered life, which is just to say, you've got to stop just thinking about yourself. You know, life is not about you exclusively. You got to get away from that. And revelation, inspiration comes from listening and singing the hymns composed by Nanak. He composed thousands of these hymns. Even though they considered them separate from Hinduism as such, they joined in the Hindu festivals. They combine private and public worship with social action, public service, earning an honest living, and giving alms. So, I mean, if you're going to India and have to choose something to join the sort of Indian, you know, I think we can easily become Sikhs, right? I mean, it's so much like Protestant Christianity. From 1870 to 1947, Sikh men were recruited into the colonial army while others became civil service, educators, and business people. In 1879, the Lion Society was formed to vitalize the faith through educational and literary activities and political agitation. Now you can identify as Sikh. I mean, you can see them in America actually, because they wear these turbans. Sikhs never cut their hair, since uncut hair is a symbol of holiness. They clean it with water and oil. They comb their hair before they put it into their turban, and generally before they go to bed at night. I know what some of you are thinking. If they don't cut the hair, eventually the hair will go down to the floor. That doesn't happen. All right. Hair grows to a certain length and it stops, depending on your genetic code. Okay, try it. Okay. Just let your hair grow, see how long it gets. Eventually it will stop. Hey David, is that right? Your hair will eventually stop?
Yes.
Stop growing. They wear a bracelet, originally to protect themselves. Originally, when they're sword fighting, and they have a metal bracelet, I guess if somebody hits them right there, the bracelet will protect them from getting hurt. And they wear a ceremonial sword, short sword, and it's interpreted in a completely spiritual way as to protect the sword, to protect the weak from injustice, tyranny, and forced conversion, and to protect oneself from greed, lust, and pride. Okay, so the sword there is to kind of remind them that human life always involves struggle, right? Struggle. Now, in Christian faith, we usually think of time as sort of going in a straight line. That's sort of a linear way of thinking. In Hindu thinking, the time goes in a circle. Time goes in a circle, huge, humongous circle, sorry. So once creation has begun, the earth, they believe, evolves through 4 eras called yugas. And it starts with this one here, and goes around this way. We are in the last one, in the Kali Yuga, which is the small purple section. In the first yuga, called the Krita Yuga, this is the golden age, bereft of suffering and want. Virtues and meditation come naturally. That's what happened in the first yuga. In the second and third yugas, inclination to virtue slowly slips downward. Now we need the different castes to keep order. Right? You have the different castes. And the Vedas were composed to help those striving for truth and goodness. Whereas in the first yuga, we didn't need any of that. Everything just sort of came naturally. Now this is very similar to the Christian idea of paradise or the fall, right? In the beginning, we have Adam and Eve. Everything was just perfect. And then we have the fall, which is just another way of saying that the world, as we experience it, is not the world that God intended. That's when we say that the existence is a fall from essence. It means that the world as we experience is not the way the world was intended to be. That there's a gap there. Now we are in the last cycle. It began in 3102 BCE. We're right here. Things get worse until at the end the earth is destroyed. So you have the golden age, and then you have a gradual diminution of virtue, and then we have to have all kinds of things to kind of keep things together. And now we're in the last yuga, when things get worse and worse until the earth is destroyed. And then a new cycle begins. A new cycle begins. Our time today under this yuga is over. So we'll pick this up on next week. Let's close with prayer. Gracious God, we stand in awe of the fact that you have placed us on this planet, in this vast cosmos, universe, beyond our imagination. And you have instilled within each of us a desire, a yearning to connect with your presence and with your power and with your spirit. We thank you too that not only in our own Christian tradition, but in other traditions as well, that yearning and that desire takes on different forms. And that we have the faith to believe that you're not only working among us, but you're working among peoples in other traditions as well. So guide us this week. Give us the sense of your presence in our life. Help us to do those things that please you most. And help us always to be a grateful, compassionate people. Amen. Okay, we have handouts. We have handouts for the previous weeks. We have whole sets for the church history. Thank you very much.